Welcome to another episode of Make Mental Health Matter. My name is Kelly Melissa Reinhart, and I am your host. I am very excited for you to be here today, as with every single Monday that we do this show, because the greatest part about the show is that I am able to bring you resources, people resources, because in the mental health space, sometimes it feels like it's very inundated, that maybe we don't have access to enough resources. But really, truly, there are so many resources out there that maybe we just don't know that they're there. Or maybe we are in our little bubble of the world and we're not really sure where to go, who to talk to, how to get help, how to ask for help. There's so many barriers that people may face when we're really looking at asking for help as related to mental health challenges, substance use challenges, or if you are somebody who experiences suicidal ideation. Sometimes we don't want to talk about what is going on in our heads because we don't want to get labeled with the words like crazy or other words that we put on people when we just don't understand what they're going through or what they're experiencing. And so this show, what it is all about is bringing you people resources, the people that are out there that are professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or those that have lived experience, because we all go throughout this life. And at any point in time, we could be experiencing a mental health challenge, or somebody we know might also. And being able to access TV shows and radio shows like this one that can tell you a little bit more or give you a little bit more information, tools, tips, and stories about what others have gone through so that you know that you're not alone and you have access at your fingertips to all sorts of people and things and tools across the world. So, that's my little spiel that I want to go on. And that's the whole point of the show, is giving you this information so that we can have these hard conversations. Because if we don't have these conversations, then how are we going to really get into that space of healing and know that, again, that we're not alone? So I'm excited for my guest today to have a really great conversation around all of these things. So I'm going to introduce him and then we'll have a little chat. So Patrick is my guest for today, and he is a licensed clinical social worker with over a decade of experience in the field. His expertise lies in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, if you've ever heard that acronym. And he is passionate about helping others improve their quality of life. Patrick founded the Mental Health Toolbox LLC, a video podcast and online platform dedicated to educating therapists and consumers on effective strategies for personal development. His focus is on interpersonal effectiveness and helping individuals overcome social anxiety to realize their full potential. He is currently developing online courses, workbooks, and handouts, worksheets to meet the needs of his audience. And outside of work, he enjoys wellness, personal development, and productivity, and cherishes spending time with his wife and two daughters. His mission is really to equip therapists with tools for better service and provide actionable tips on mental health and personal development to help everyone live their best life. So let me bring him up. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kelly. What a nice introduction. Much appreciated. I spend time with my dogs too, but they spend most of their time sleeping, like you can see behind me here.
Nice. Yes, we love the pets.
Right? Every it's kind of cliche, but every therapist has a office dog these days, I think, since the pandemic.
Right? I know. I cannot take my dog to my office. He probably would just be like a little bonkers at first. He might out, but dog.
Good stuff.
So I know I just did a pretty robust intro. However, can you tell the audience a little bit more about your journey and how you got into doing what you do today?
Hey, I really appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. So, my backstory is maybe not like some others in terms of the therapy world, mental health. I know a lot of people, my colleagues even, say, always, I always wanted to be a therapist. I always knew I wanted to get into this field and help people, but it definitely wasn't the case for me. And a little bit about my backstory, it's a bit unorthodox, my childhood, but mental health was never on my radar, right? I never was exposed to mental health services growing up, or social workers. Um, in fact, I was never even really uh, expecting to go to college, right? And so, a little bit of my background, I grew up for a little bit in Redondo Beach, California, and till about 5, and our family lost our house, and they took the proceeds to buy a motorhome. And then what was, I thought, going to be a 2-week vacation at 5 ended up being 11 years, you know, of traveling the state up and down, RV parks, KOAs, that kind of thing. So my life was unorthodox, to say the least, in terms of just how I grew up, right? And so I never stepped foot into a classroom until college. I did all of my studies through correspondence, and to a large degree, a lot of that lifestyle required me to get really comfortable with change, right? We were constantly moving, would make friends, would have to move again. And due to large part the fact that we grew up in poverty, right? So my stepfather, God rest his soul, he passed about a year ago. He struggled with alcoholism, and my mother struggled with mental illness. And so it was more or less up to my older sister to kind of be the mother figure for us. And she's about 11 years older than me, and so she, was taxed with that kind of responsibility to look after her younger siblings. And that was kind of just give you an idea of our dynamic, right? The way I grew up, that it was already a kind of a tall order for me to even get through high school, let alone talk about college and vision and career, right? So it wasn't, like I said, on my radar. And even though definitely would have benefited from mental health services, I never accessed mental health services. And I think to a large degree too, when you grow up that way, it's just maybe not part of what you're exposed to in your community, that type of community. For anyone listening or watching that's maybe been raised in trailer parks and that kind, nothing against that lifestyle, but it's definitely, you're not as privileged to the options and resources available that you might otherwise be pri- you know privy to if you're in the school system, or you have other professionals in your bubble, right? So to a large extent, that's one of the reasons I say that I was never intending to be a therapist. But we lost our mother when I was about 10, and then shortly my stepfather had to move away after that. So wasn't much in the way of parental guidance or expectations thereof. I was kind of a latchkey kid. I definitely was a latchkey kid. I didn't go to school, public school that is. I running the streets, just killing time, waiting for my friends to get out of school. But you know, to some teenagers, that might sound really exciting. To me, I did not like that. I wanted the structure. I was thirsty for the structure. I was jealous of my kids who went to public school. Nonetheless, it wasn't until I met my youth pastor at about 15 who kind of put my head on straight. And it was going to a youth group with one of my friends just to kill time that I was exposed to youth group and church and the whole thing. And for me, that was a pivotal point. Even not so much from the spiritual aspect as much as from structure, right? That was kind of, I wasn't used to that structure. I wasn't used to maybe that cohesiveness with my peers. So that kind of whet my appetite. And I started taking my schooling more seriously. I played a lot of catch up, And I pretty much lived in coffee shops through my teenage years and just cranked away at my home studies and started taking college classes even at 16 to try and get double credit. And that was a whole experience. And again, I think for a lot of people who are used to, by the time they get out of high school, they're just kind of sick, right? Of the classroom and tests and the whole bit, the rigmarole. But when I took my first college class at 16, it was like, yes, I was very, very intimidated. I was socially intimidated. We can get more into that. Social anxiety, the way I grew up, um, feeling less than, a lot of self doubt. However, I was very thirsty for structure.
Mhm.
And the classroom, even though it was a big adjustment for me, deadlines, due dates, right? All that fun stuff. I was really thirsty for that structure and that discipline, and it really opened my eyes, right? And I'm glad I took that leap. And again, to a large extent, my family was very supportive. The way I grew up, my brother-in-law, my sister, uh, my older brother, always very supportive. My other sister, who's now passed about a year, she was a wonderful influence, right? She got her high school proficiency at 16 and got out of the house, and so I looked up to her. And college, again, having not been on my horizon, as I started to wrap my head around the idea of career and development and getting ahead, I wasn't thinking mental health. Rather, I was first just thinking, okay, I'll be an X-ray tech.
Mhm.
And then maybe it was okay, a little ultrasound tech. And I started exploring, and I still remember significantly to this day, in the college library, there was a book about this thick. And it was called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And I remember thumbing through it, and it's online now, and I refer it to clients all the time. It's called the OO. For anybody listening who wants a great resource if you're unsure about a career path, the OO. It's run by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And in the very back, there's like this top 10, like best bang for your buck careers. And I remember thinking to myself, what's the quickest way out of poverty for someone like me? And I was like, oh, anesthesiologist, of course, is always like at the top. But I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not having a background in, formal education. It was maybe a bit too much to bite off. But I saw pharmacist, and that kind of whet my appetite. So for better or worse, hell or high water, that kind of became my compass. I was like, okay, so I stink at science and math because the way I grew up, but I kind of rocked at English because of the self-study, right? I had to
Mhm.
read a lot of books, do reports, and you know, became very comfortable with English and expression and understanding kind of the nuances of creative writing and critical thinking. But when it came to math and science, man, I had a lot of catching up to do. But I figured, okay, I can give it a shot, and I did. I put all of my energy into thinking pre-med, but I knew my science wasn't good enough, and I it was really rough junior college. Like, long story short, like I think I repeated general biology because of the lab like 4 times, and trigonometry and geometry, and it was kind of a hot mess with the math and science. But I eventually got my rhythm, and I transferred into UC, but that was as a sociology major because I knew I wouldn't get in as a science major. Long story short, that's kind of the earth, like, give you an idea, as we talk about my story and my mission and why I'm in this space. It's important to understand kind of my roots,
Mhm.
because I had to learn to be scrappy, right? I had to learn to be scrappy, and I had to learn to get past my own limiting beliefs in order to paint a meaningful future for myself,
Mhm.
right? And this is where my heart lies, is helping other disenfranchised people, maybe who struggle with those limiting beliefs because of the way they grew up, or they didn't have the resources to get stuck in that mindset that where you begin in life determines where you end up. And that's only true if you believe it. And because I had that schema shift, because I was exposed, again, a large part due to the support that I had through my youth pastor, the church, my sister, my brother-in-law, some core supports. I had enough emotional, moral support to think through my challenges, right?
Mhm.
And as I was drudging through UC, working as a waiter, graveyard shift all through, all through the night, and getting up and going to school and volunteering at my church and burning the candle at both ends. I was still so determined to be a pharmacist because for me, it meant an escape from poverty. And I was looking at mostly the income. However, as I was finishing up my undergrad, it suddenly was not sitting well with me, this idea of being a pharmacist. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I had finished all my coursework, and I was looking at applying for graduate school. And I remember asking my sociology professor at the time, what do I do? Because I fell in love with sociology. I love people. I loved being a waiter. Yeah. And we can get more into that, why I think everybody should wait tables, especially if they grew up with any kind of social angst or anxiety. But and at the time, even the college was offering me a full ride to stay on for my PhD in sociology, right? So here I had this: do I become a professor of sociology? Do I do something else? And my friend at the time was recommending, she was a nurse, she said social work. And I didn't know what social work meant. I just thought, that's the people my sister was afraid of growing up. They were going to take me away after my mom died, And so it didn't, even when I would mention it to my coworkers at the restaurant, they'll say, aren't those the people take your kids away? So that was kind of like the bad connotation people had, association with social work. But as I started to look into it, I remember Googling, schools of social work near me, and Loma Linda University came up. And I knew the school because I had walked it many, many times, because that's where I was wanting to go to pharmacy school, was Loma Linda. And I'm very visual. I believe very much, being in the environments, immersing yourself in the environments that you envision yourself being in, right? And so I would wander. I toured the campus. I don't know how many times I talked to the staff. Like, I would get really hyper focused on those things, those visuals. So I remember the school because of the pharmacy school. And so, I thought that's interesting. I didn't know they had a school of social work. So I did a tour. And that's when it clicked. Again, mind you, having no experience up to this point, I'm probably 25 years old. No, just finished undergrad. Had no exposure to mental health or social work or anything. I'm just kind of like throwing my my net out there and kind of seeing what's going on. So I do the tour, and as soon as they start explaining what social work is and the mission of social work and the purpose, like, it's all of these dots started connecting in my head about the way I grew up. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, I could have used that growing up. Oh, wow. Okay. So I could see how I could fit into this picture. And I knew I just wanted to be of service. And I think this is what wasn't settling well with me growing up, is when I was looking at college, is with pharmacy, is because I love being a waiter. I love the face-to-face time with people, which again is kind of an oxymoron when you look at the social anxiety I had growing up as well. But I understood the importance of connecting with people, because people are power. Relationships, right, are the cornerstone of a quality life and progress and success. And I learned a lot of these soft skills as a waiter, right? Because even though I was like really against the grain, learning to connect with people in short spurts of time, there's no motivation like your income to make you do uncomfortable things, So I ended up getting accepted to Loma Linda, and I did the program there. And that's what got me into mental health as a career. Could I have been happy doing other things? Sure, as long as I felt like I was being useful. But I feel like it was very serendipitous that I was led into the mental health world, because it gives me a unique opportunity and position to help others, one, become more aware of their resources and their support, but help them reframe and rethink their limiting beliefs around what's getting in their way with happiness, with a quality of life, however they want to define it. That's a long answer to your question.
No, that's good. You're good. There's so much goodness in there, and so many things that make questions pop into my head, but we're going to go to our quick first sponsored break. And then once we get back, I'll ask some of those questions that popped in my head. So
Sure.
we'll be right back after this quick sponsored break.
Thank you.
Hi, Laura Cross, your host for Mindful Mondays every Monday at 1 p.m. Central Time, where you can embark on a transformative journey of self-care and ultimate happiness. Tune in to the Voyage to Vitality channel on the Achieve TV network. Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. Be there, be mindful, and join us on E360 TV.
Hi, I'm Julianne Meyer, the host of Own Your Wellness, and you can watch my show on Mondays and Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific on Achieve TV right here on E360 TV. Remember, there's more to health and wellness than broccoli and burpees.
And like that, we're back.
I love it.
So thank you so much for sharing, because like you said, background is very important as we talk about mental health, and just knowing where you came from and how you got to the point that you are now. And there were some really cool things that you said, as far as one, you talked about access, well, traveling a lot also as a child, and having to go place to place to place, which we don't often talk enough about, I feel like, because the kids that maybe their family or parents are military, or they constantly are moving from one place to another place to another place, which tends to bring up some of the social anxiety, and then also access to resources and knowing the area. And I mean, there's so many layers to what you said too, and there are barriers that we have to have the conversations about. Also just knowing and having the awareness of what's around you. And I love that you also talked about that structure. It was something that you craved. And what went into my head is that sometimes as parents, we don't think about that. It's like we're going from one thing to another thing, and our kids are kind of just coming with us as we go throughout this life, and we're not really tuning into the needs of our children specifically. And I think that's a whole nother conversation that we could totally have too. But and then I feel you on the math and science. I was one too that when I went to college, I started right out of high school, and then I probably changed my degree about 5 times.
That's typical.
Realized I was like, I realize that I'm wasting money now. I should probably just wait until I know what I want to do. And math and science, I wanted to be a marine biologist, but that's a lot of math and science, and not good at it either. So I took a 10-year sabbatical and went back and found the fastest path to get out of college, which was communications and psychology, or minor in psychology. But throughout that, the finishing my degree, I found where I wanted to be. So I love that you also talked about that. Is at first it's like, I don't know, I really, really want to do this. And then you get into it and you're like, it's not really what I want to do. And then you can finally get to this place that, wow, this is where I need to be. And of course, towards the end of my degree is really when I found all the professors that I really loved. And I was like, man, I wish I could continue my education, which now I have. But yeah, it's just such an interesting thing, this path where we thought we were going to be. But then all of these little things lead us into where we're meant to be.
Absolutely.
And so I love that you mentioned that. And also giving the background. That's just huge. So I do want to shift into, because you now are a therapist.
Mhm.
You also really are creating this space for therapists to be able to access resources. And I'm curious, what led you into wanting to be able to design all these things?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't like a epiphany, overnight. Um, I remember, thinking to myself, how can I create something that could maybe make a teeny bit of money to help pay off my student loans?
Yeah.
Like many therapists are probably thinking, about, 5, 6, 7, 10 years into their career, into county work was, because I was hired right into county work at a graduate school. And I remember listening, as I love podcasts, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about blog and how you can make money on blogs. And I thought, well, even if I don't make anything, it'd be a nice outlet for me because I know I like to write. I know I like to provide value. And I thought it makes sense because as therapists, it's almost like a lot of it's the curse of knowledge, like imposter syndrome. Like I have it all the time. It's like, oh, what do I have to offer? And then I forget as I'm talking to clients, I'm like, oh yeah, I have this resource and that resource and this resource. And oh yeah, you can do this and have, here's this coping skill, here's this technique. And then you start to remember, oh, I guess I do know quite a bit. I just kind of forget what that everyone doesn't know these things.
Mhm.
And so, but the problem is it's often reserved for people who access mental health or counseling of some sort. And there's a lot of hoops to jump through just to get into a therapy office, right? It's not as simple as picking up the phone. Which it's better than it used to be, but there's still a process.
Mhm.
So I remember thinking to myself, oh, well, I could share a little knowledge, not that a blog or a podcast replaces therapy. That's not what I'm saying, but it is knowledge, and knowledge is power, right? We don't know what we don't know. We don't know. So I thought, oh, this is a great way to share a little knowledge of the things I've learned along the way as a counselor, and I might make a few bucks. I never did make any money from the blog, but um, I, I'm an avid listener of podcasts, and I have a passion for small business and just listening because I just think it's fascinating. And lis- listening to Pat Flynn, I don't know if you're familiar. You probably are. No, no.
I'm
Pat
not.
Flynn, Smart Passive Income. He has a SPI. SPI is his podcast, and Ask Pat is the other podcast. But he's just a phenomenal podcaster and serial entrepreneur. And I remember watching some of his videos, and that's what got me into thinking about starting a podcast. I was like, oh, I can take the blog and I can add an audio to it. Okay, that's cool. So then I started playing around with that shortly before the pandemic hit. And then I further added to that when I started listening to Sean Cannell and Think Media, who you probably know about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, he did this Grow with Video Live online seminar thing. And then it's like my eye, like a veil came down from my eyes. Like, whoa, it just such a such an amazing outlet. What we're doing right now.
Mm.
And there's no time like today to have this available. And the pandemic did a lot of damage, but one thing it did do, it increased access to care for mental health, and it empowered everyone to have platforms and vehicles to serve each other online. And that's when I started my YouTube channel. And so then it became kind of this progression. So the blog, the podcast, and the YouTube channel all kind of became one system,
Mhm.
right? Of a way to serve other people. And it's grown. It continues to grow, and I continue to kind of tweak and figure it out and what I want to do with it. But what I do know is that it fills that creative itch I can scratch, and also my need to be of service, right? In a larger way than I can as a one-on-one therapist.
Mm.
And I would continue to do the work and will and do the one-on-one therapy work, and it's not a replacement for that. But it's definitely empowering to be able to share sometimes small, seemingly, you know, helpful tips and tactics to things that could be life-changing. to other people, resources and tools. And it's just such a wonderful platform to be able to do that. And big vision, is to be able to provide a large, more online courses and workshops and paid programs and have it become profitable so that I can do more and grow it, hire help and that kind of thing and scale it. But I think everyone should have a creative outlet for their own mental health because it has definitely helped me, even during the pandemic. I think everybody had their projects to stay sane, right? Because mine is just continues to be a passion project of mine, mostly because I want to be of service, to others.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and I'm sure you're a little bit like me. I had a mentor at one point in time, and they're saying, "Hey, you can do a show," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And and then one day I was like, "Yeah, I can do a show." And I remember, I mean, I remember the first time I ever did a live video
Mhm.
on Facebook. I was like bouncing around,
Yeah.
and I was giving people vertigo, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible." But the more and more you do it, the easier it gets, of course. But it's this outlet of, I mean, I love this show because I get to meet amazing guests like you that are doing amazing things in this world to help others. And there's never enough. And I know you and I were kind of talking about that before we came on air, but there's so many different resources out there, but we all have our different skills we've learned throughout time, how we can help and serve others. And there's never a way for schools specifically to teach us everything, right?
Mhm.
So being able to share the information this way, I think, is the most important. And then also letting people know that we go through these experiences in life and you do have access to other resources. And if you're somebody that it's easier to listen to podcasts or read blogs or whatever form of media, or taking in the information that you are able to do, I think is important. So I do also, because I know you brought a slide that
Oh,
we
sure.
kind of were going
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about, but you also talked a little bit about having social anxiety. And I think that is a topic. Actually, I don't know if we've talked about anxiety before on the show, but not really like the social anxiety aspect. So I'd love if you want to share a little bit of both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we use terms like depression, anxiety as therapists, we kind of know the context. Kind of like you were talking about with the interview in the online space, the podcasting. Like if you're on step 0 and someone's talking about things like live streaming to multiple platforms and creating online courses, like your eyes will gloss over. You're like, or you have one idea about what that means, and then you don't really know what to make of it, or you don't know how to apply it, or you don't know how or why it could be useful. Just like anything, knowledge is that way and experience. And I think that's why therapy is so important because as therapists, when you say something like anxiety, we know that could mean many things. That could mean general anxiety disorder. That could mean social anxiety. That could mean panic disorder. That could mean agoraphobia. That could mean organic anxiety. That can be substance induced anxiety. That can be attachment disorder. That could be a myriad of things, right? And it's not just one thing. And I that's that's the beauty of having educational content like this. So we can talk about it in a way that educates the public. So social anxiety is, like I said, a passion of mine. I think because the way we grow up is oftentimes insecurity, that person and environment where we feel like we're comparing ourselves to our peers. And comparative thinking is a double-edged sword, right? But it can definitely hinder us from growing and excelling in our lives because if we think that we're not good enough or we're comparing ourselves to other people that we see our peers, then it'll stop us from taking action, right? And social anxiety is unlike other types of anxiety because it is very much it's not a fixed thing, right? It's not a fixed thing. Whereas somebody with general anxiety disorder might be a chemical imbalance, right? Somebody with panic disorder, you know, it's very much a more extreme example of general anxiety, you know? It's partly a thought process disorder, but a lot of these conditions are organic and sometimes chemical or neurological, and you can take some steps to mitigate them. But something like social anxiety, it's not a fixed diagnosis. I mean, you can learn to overcome it,
Mm.
which is nice. And there's, being of the cognitive behavioral therapy modality, because that's what I was trained in, that's what I'm certified in. It helps me really frame. There's definitely other ways to look at social anxiety, but if we want to throw the slide up there, I can kind of talk about. Let's see. Yeah. So this is just little slots. I like infographics. I'm very visual. You'll see this same kind of flow chart when you're looking at different CBT type, ideas around different, if you want to call them disorders or conditions or whatever. But I think when we're looking at social anxiety, it's important to kind of understand the flow, right, of how things move. And more importantly, because they give us an idea of points of intervention, right? And that's really what therapy is many things, right? Therapy is, yes, a place to talk about and process your thoughts and feelings. It's a place to problem solve. It's a place to gain resources and skills, right? But that all happens at different points of intervention, right? And if we think about depression, there's really three pillars of depression and treatment, right? There's your thought process, there's your behavior, and then there's your people relationships, right? And you'll find this to be kind of the through line with many things when we're looking at treatment. Same thing is true with social anxiety in this sense. And understanding where you struggle is really important. And this is where the work really happens in recovery. When once we identify a problem, let's call it social anxiety. It's oftentimes the identified threat, or what our acute stress response is sensitive to, in the way that we're interpreting something that happens. Could be an argument with a family member, could be something that happens at school, could be a breakup in a relationship or sense of rejection. Whatever the situation is or the event, there's something about it that we are interpreting as a threat to our ego, our sense of self, our stability, our future, our health, right? And this is where the battle is fought and won, is in our thought process, how we're interpreting the situation. And so we think of this as the activating event or trigger. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, trigger, right? Triggers could be anything. It could be something we see, something we hear, something we think about, something we smell that makes us think about something. So anything could potentially be a trigger. And we just use the term trigger because that's bringing up something in us that's uncomfortable for whatever reason. And so once we're triggered, or we interpret something as a threat, right? When it comes to social anxiety specifically, oftentimes it's the reflected appraisal, which means our negative reflected appraisals that get us in trouble. And this is what I would think is the first point of intervention, right? This is when we assume we know what other people are thinking about us, and it's bad, right? Ideally, we would assume that people are thinking good things about us. But negative reflected appraisals are oftentimes kind of the Achilles heel of social anxiety. That's that desire to relate and be relatable to other people, but feeling like there's this dissonance, there's this chasm between us and how other people are living their lives. And let me tell you, social media has not made this better. Right? Especially when we're talking about teenagers and scrolling on TikTok and Instagram. And it's a tool, but I think everyone, and nobody gets a pass on this. Nobody gets a pass on that negative self-talk, right? We're all subject to when we start comparing ourselves to other people. Doesn't take much. And so this would be the first point of intervention. But once this happens, this negative reflected appraisal, right? Whether it's in real life or it's in our head and we're playing a hypothetical tape, right? Comparing ourselves, that triggers ants, or otherwise known as automatic negative thoughts, right? Automatic negative thoughts are just negative self-talk, right? Oh, I'm not, good enough for this person or that person, or that person's judging me, or I know I shouldn't have done that. I'm so stupid. We start labeling, right, ourselves in a negative light. Automatic negative thoughts. This could also be like worst case scenario stuff. Oh, I knew this would happen, or if I do this, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And that's a trademark for anxiety. We go 10 steps ahead to the worst case scenario. The harmful thought habit, and that's the HTH there. Harmful thinking habits, that would be like catastrophizing. Right. And so this is kind of the other point of intervention, right? If we can't stop it here, then we need to stop it here. And this is where we learn to label. This is why in therapy they do mood tracking so much, thought tracking. It's not so much that we want to give people homework. I really don't like journaling. It's that we need to understand patterns. And if we can learn to label our thoughts, and then we can learn to identify when it's happening because we've labeled it, then we can challenge it. The problem with anxiety in general, you could say this is probably true for depression too, is that we give all of our thoughts just free rein. We give everything a green light. Well, if I'm thinking it, then it must be true. Yeah. We're not saying that outright to ourselves usually, but that's kind of what's happening, because we're not really taught to think about our thinking, right? Yeah. So when we get in the habit of thinking about our thinking and having a check and balance system, then we can start the reality testing, right? We can ask ourselves the ABCs. Is this thought accurate? Is it balanced? And is it complete? If we don't have all three checks and balances there, then we're kind of subject to limiting thoughts or skewed thoughts, right? Especially the less information we have, the easier it is to go to those places. That makes sense.
Yeah. We're gonna go to one more quick sponsored break, but then once we get back, we will go back into this and you can share a little bit more. But we're gonna go to this quick sponsored break and we'll be right back.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I lost my middle sister, Carrie, to a completed suicide on February 20th, 2017.
My story, however, it isn't unique. I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering addict. For 14 years, I was in active addiction. And because of Kelli and the work that she does and the opportunity to have my voice heard, I was able to stay clean and sober and have hit a year. I'm still here. And if it wasn't for Kelli answering my call the day that I thought I was going to take my life.
Curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community, it is very hush-hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelli, because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show, and I saw how real and authentic you were. And I just appreciate the question, because it is different and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be, because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with.
Kelli's passionate commitment to mental health awareness is a beautiful thing. It's clear in her social media posts, it's clear in the resources that she puts together, in the activities that she provides, her collaboration with organizations, and the consistent way that she continues to deliver a message, encouraging people to understand that they can share openly and to break the stigma around mental health. Kelli's topics cover children and adults, talk about things that we can do as a community, things that we can do individually, And her website is packed with information and resources and all kinds of contacts that you can use to reach out, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you're looking to help somebody else who is struggling. I encourage you to check it out.
All right.
All right.
So we only have about 3 minutes left. So I don't know if you could go through this a little bit quicker,
Sure,
because I
sure.
want to make sure that we have an opportunity to share where people can find you specifically.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is again just a flow chart that kind of talks about the process of what happens with social anxiety. But really, these are each points of intervention. And if you want to learn more kind of about what this looks like, of course, we'll talk about where you can find my website, blog, YouTube channel, and you can kind of dive more deeply into this. But core beliefs are just the beliefs we hold about ourselves, the deep beliefs that we form through our lived experience. Those are the things that are agitated by the negative thoughts. That brings on emotions. That emotion is usually fear, right? If something bad happening, fear is usually the flip side of anxiety. That creates a somatic response that we know anxiety for, that the dizziness, the depersonalization, derealization, numbness, nausea, panic attacks, and that leads to compensatory behaviors. That could be things like stuttering speech or trying to evade the situation to get away from the triggers, and then that leads to a sense of hypervigilance. You feel like the spotlight's on you, and you run.
Yeah.
So, and that just kind of reinforces the evasion behavior all over again, right? Because your body learns, when I'm triggered, I run, because running is safe, right? And so that's just the whole cycle. So, you know, the challenge then is to find out where are the points of intervention in this cycle, and that's going to be different for everybody in terms of the low-hanging fruit. Yes, we could attack it from any one of these, but everybody has their ideal point of intervention, and you don't really know that until you start digging. And that's why I say it's good to have someone working with you who can kind of help you identify where the low-hanging fruit is, so that you can start to get some leverage. And then the beautiful thing about mental health is you find one stronghold and everything else gets easier, right?
Yeah, I love how you just showed the cycle, and at any point in time, we can have intervention. And the best part is that the earlier you get help, the earlier we can like stop that flow from happening. So, I love that you have the chart. And so if people, well, when people, not if, but when they want to find you, where is the best place for them to go?
Sure. You can head over to the mentalhealthtoolbox.com. And yes, there you go. Excellent. And then if you just put /links after that, you'll see all of my social links, YouTube, podcast links, anywhere. If you want a quick way to find me, the mentalhealthtoolbox.com /links. But other than that, just go to the website. And if you want me to share my screen there at all, but I can kind of walk you through it real quick. Yeah. So if you go to the website here, then you'll just see I have the homepage here. But right here, you can go to the YouTube channel from the watch. You can go straight to the podcast from listen, the blog from read. I have resources there if you're have any interest, journals, workbooks, meditations, and so forth. And just I think I'm still working on it. It's always a work in progress. Open to feedback. If anybody has a request for the podcast, at the top of the page there, you can make requests for topics. But really, it's there as a tool to serve other therapists, to provide resources to clients and consumers of mental health to get those coping skills that are sometimes kind of reserved for the therapy office, which I'm trying to make it more accessible. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I think websites are like, that's my always thing that I'm doing.
And I
So,
love your website, and I love the work you're doing, Kelly. It's just
oh,
fantastic, and I'm honored to be on your show and to be able to be another soldier in the battle for mental health awareness. And I appreciate you raising awareness for the work I'm doing,
yeah.
and just keep it up. It's just wonderful what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I so appreciate you. This was such an amazing conversation. And maybe I'll have to have you come back at a later time and we can go into even more stuff. So thank you so much for being a guest for today.
Absolutely. And vice versa. You're always welcome on my show.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. I know we only touched like a little brief part on social anxiety, but I think that, I mean, just looking at the flowchart and getting more understanding is the important part, and knowing that we all face barriers throughout life, and our story is important, where we started and how we got into what we do today, how we can change and shift, and it doesn't always have to be that one thing. It can manifest or form. I don't know if that's the word today, but it can change, and we can find our path wherever we belong. We also can have tools at our fingertips, which is so cool. So make sure you go check out. There's the website one more time. Lots of information on there. I'm telling you, resources are so important, especially as we talk about this thing called life that we're all going through and experiencing. But we do have resources and information that can also make it a little bit easier. And how great would that be to have life be easy? I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty good to me. No matter what you do, make sure you come back next Monday and join us for another episode. I have amazing guests lining up to share information and resources with you. So you can watch or listen on E360 TV. You can watch or you can listen on Dream Vision 7 Radio by simply saying, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio. No matter what you do, I'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.